Hello, Ben. Oh, Ben's not attached to audio yet. Now Ben's attached to audio. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. Just got an hour-long Jira meeting, so as good as that can be.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like a cry party waiting to happen.
Slightly better, but yeah.
Yeah. As I said before you joined, my current life cry party is that our roof is being replaced. So I can't think about anything other than the hammering on my roof.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not envious of that at all.
Well, it's going to be nice to have a new roof.
Yeah, that is exciting. Not having, having a fresh roof is really neat.
Yeah. The part where we had a hailstorm here in Colorado a few weeks ago, and there are large holes down to the tar on the old roof. I mean, the old roof is now gone. They're putting the new everything
Right.
in.
So the speed holes you don't like those, huh?
Yeah. The direct access to the interior of the house, don't want that.
Yeah, but just think of it as like a rodent highway, right? All those rodents.
We do have a lot of squirrels.
Yeah,
You're just trying to distribute water absorption through as wide an area as possible.
Please, let's
Maybe
not.
the holes will let the squirrels out.
Oh, yeah. I
You
wonder how
thought
many
about
squirrels
that?
are. Yeah, I hadn't thought about how many squirrels might be in my attic.
Yeah.
We can
I hope
apply
so.
the we can apply the ideal gas law to squirrel density in Joshua's house.
Yikes. Yeah. So what's funny is that when we bought the house, the inspector said that the roof needed to be replaced, and the seller said, "Well, we aren't doing that." But the insurance company says, "Yeah, if you want to buy that house, y'all need to do that, or you need to have it certified." So we had a roofer come out and certify that it was good for 5 years. That was 2 years ago, and we had a hailstorm since then. And the insurance company came out and said, "Yeah, you need to replace this." So here we are. We submitted to the HOA that we needed to have it replaced, and they're like, they haven't approved it yet, but like,
Oh darn!
it's been 20 days, and I kind of don't care that you're not approving, and they can go ahead and try and fine me for replacing my roof.
We don't have an HOA, and it's just everything I hear is always like the most bananas thing.
Oh yeah, I could have hours worth of cry party on HOAs.
No need. There's an entire Reddit for it.
There is. This is true. Yeah. Well, somebody else tell us a cry party story. I'd love to hear it. When I can hear things between the banging.
I've got a couple. How recent do we want them to be? Okay, I'll do. So this came from when I was a junior DevOps individual who was hired on to a now defunct startup that was called JED. Was then called something else after I left. They laid us all off. But it was a CRM group that had gotten too big for their britches, so to take some of that sweet CRM money. And they wanted to apply it over into like a social, how do I describe this? It was like supposed to be like a family organization app. So imagine like Facebook, but only the like planning portions of it And then with this extremely well thought of encryption mechanism. So basically you would have like all of your family data encrypted. So that way you could share it amongst all of your immediate family, right? So this is like, if you needed to have dad's SSN, you could put it in JED and we would have it encryption locked. So that way that only family members could access it. And then if you wanted to add somebody to your tribe, as they called it, you could then, peer them into your little group, and then they would be able to decrypt all of the secrets and other things that your family had, like, so door codes, security numbers, and you also had a chat, and you also had, photographs, and you also had, any other like, Web 3.0 media function under the sun, but all of it was, encrypted. So that way, that was our value add to the whole thing. But what that meant was we had a not so large amount of time spent thinking about, well, how do we actually encrypt all this data in RDS? And so we were like, okay, let's use KMS keys. We'll use KMS. We'll encrypt all the data in RDS at the row level based around the user schema. We will, so we'll do all this in dev, right? So the team was 2 APIs in pre-launch. We had 2 rewrites of our mobile application, and we were on our second installation of Django, and we had migrated the whole application from a custom Docker stack over into EC2 at this time. So this was the tail end of the EC2 migration. We basically had it up and running. We were about to do investor shows with it, and we decide we're going to do a KMS cutover of the production database to prepare for prod. And the lead engineer at the time, he starts doing the encryption on the production database with the KMS key. And then we realized that something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Like we're using the wrong key to do it. And we start asking him, okay, so what key did you use? And he can't tell us. He doesn't know. He's forgotten and he can't find it. And we say, so you're telling me we just encrypted a database that we can't decrypt? And he's like, yeah. Okay, and so we go into full rollback procedure, trying to understand how we can like undo this, because the entire database is now unreadable, right? So we rapidly spin out another set of RDS instances. We pour all the data that we had from backups into it, and before the bad times. We spend the better part of maybe, I don't know, it was like a day and a half doing this. In order to retrieve functionality. We put off our investor meetings that we had the next day that we were planning to do this for. Everything gets rolled back to pre this point. That dude flies back to Boston because they were flying him in once a week to sit with us to do this, because he was their star developer at the time. And that was really fun and exciting. That was a really cool time. And that time was only trumped by, in the midst of an investor meeting, I migrate all assets in the platform to Glacier. That was me learning about how to use S3. And so all of the pictures, all the photographs, all of the icons, every single asset in the platform ended up on tape. And I had to migrate it back out in the middle of an investor meeting while they're demoing the application. That was the first time that I really had like a verge of a panic attack at work. And because I was having to tell like the CEO, like it's F3. I can't make it go faster. Like it has, like there's a time frame on them pulling it off of tape and putting it back in the bucket. Like I can't make it go faster. Like I wrote this rule, it was too aggressive.
Glacier's called that for a reason.
Yep. So it all got restored in about 48 hours, but all throughout the demo, there was broken buttons, like the buttons didn't look right. None of the UI looked correct. And that's when I learned all about why it's good to have all that, you don't need assets in Glacier. You don't really care about that. Maybe backups are good on Glacier. Pictures, put all the pictures in the net, put on a CDN, just forget about them. Let them exist somewhere far away from you and never touch them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are my two good starting out stories. Those were
Yeah.
real learning moments for me before we got into production. And I've got some other ones about like live services or stuff you might have seen in the past few years, but I can save those and let other people talk.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sean is is demonstrating live cry party in his background there. I see. Well done, Sean.
That's kind of what my days feel like right now. My cry party is GitLab.
I'd love to hear more because we currently use GitLab.
So we have hosted GitLab for context. We have hosted GitLab that has been in use as far back as I can tell since at least 2015. It went through some regular maintenance updates, and then the people who really cared about it left. So it's been like, technically it's 2 major versions behind at the time. Now it's only 1 because the upgrade from 13 to 14 is terrifying and a huge change, especially when you're coming from like 12. Turns out 12 has a security bug, and our GitLab is publicly accessible. And it has a lovely unauthenticated bug where you can have exif.go or whatever it is, basically execute whatever you want. Turns out people were using that. So we didn't find this out directly on our own. Someone at Google pinged our ISP who messaged us and said, hey, this looks like a GitLab issue. So I immediately spent the next 3 hours upgrading as feverishly as possible to get this done. Our security team was sanitizing the box at the same time. But I'm now dealing with the fallout of that, which is we don't know how a bunch of things were using it to pull dependencies for Jenkins builds. And we also have been trying to migrate off of GitLab to our GitHub organization for years. So my current hell is trying to figure out how to migrate things to GitHub, how to help developers use GitHub Actions to do builds for PHP, an old version of PHP.
Yeah, but how old is this? Is this like PHP 5.3?
I don't know. All I know is it's PHP, and we have like 1 dev who actually understands it still. Oh yeah, and that's part of our core processes. I have to figure out how we're going to sanitize an entire repo that's hosted on GitLab because it's not sanitized to be able to trust it being hosted on GitHub. And oh yeah, our GitLab has like 1,100 projects, and probably most of them aren't migrated to GitHub, and I don't even know if all of them need to be migrated to GitHub. But because I'm the one who stepped up, it's now my cry part. Send hugs because I don't really drink. So good luck with GitLab is basically it. Also, there isn't a lot on GitHub Actions and PHP. And I know nothing about Go, so I have to figure that out too. I'm gonna go die in that corner now.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I haven't used PHP since the Bush administration.
Since my last role involved a monolithic PHP app, and my job before it was working for Acquia, which, despite what they tell you, is a giant PHP hosting company. A little familiar with it if you want to ping me on any random stupid questions, but I try not to think too much about PHP.
You'd be surprised where it's running, is all I can say. It is really surprising where I've discovered it's just like, oh yeah, there's this little bit of PHP over here. And you're like, why? And they're like, because it worked.
Well, isn't Facebook famously like one of the largest PHP apps ever created? And Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Wikimedia, yes. Facebook is now mostly Hack, which is their own custom language, which is,
Based on PHP, right?
descended from PHP,
Yeah.
but isn't PHP in some very important ways.
I thought it was just the feed now. It was just like the main feed pane was the only PHP service they ran, or PHP-esque service they ran. And like the rest of the widgets are all their little microservices fleet. I say this as a Facebook architecture admirer.
Is the most important difference between Hack and PHP that Hack has one more letter and the letters do not involve P, H, and P in that order?
The most important difference, as far as I understand it, is that Hack is optionally typed, which means the hip hop virtual machine can optimize it better.
Oh, I thought you were going to say
That's real good.
The difference is that PHP is what Facebook ran and Hack is what Meta runs.
No. This transition is several years old now, so that can't possibly be the difference.
I mean, it could be the difference. We just never know. Who else has a fun cry party story to share?
I have a cry week. It's only Wednesday. Conversely, it's Wednesday already. And I gave my team like a week and a half's worth of work to do on Monday. So I feel really bad about that because it needs to be done this Monday, which feels bad, man.
It feels unbalanced for sure. I can appreciate that.
Sometimes deadlines just you don't really have the option of pushing back.
We'll shame you later for it.
No shaming, just hugs.
I tried, trust me.
Hey, Donald. Hey, Jeremy.
Morning, at least where I am.
Yes, it is morning, at least where I am.
How's it going?
I don't know. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Daylight doesn't help me there.
Yeah, it was raining really hard, and then super windy, and then it got really, really sunny for about an hour, and then it got super windy and knocked down some telephone poles near where I live here in Seattle here. So that was yesterday's weather. It was very exciting. There was also a but a incorrect tornado warning that some folks in the Pacific Northwest area got that turned out to not actually be real.
Friend of mine in Bremerton got tornado warning and ended up with what looked like snow until you looked closer and it was just straight hail.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a wacky day yesterday weather-wise.
Yeah, I can understand hail and tornado warnings and snow. Fortunately, it is nice and sunny here while the roofers are smashing my roof. There was a very loud thump a moment ago, so I hope everybody's okay.
It's more the splat you have to worry about.
Yes. There was debris falling into my yard earlier as they were ripping off the old shingles.
Yeah,
Jamie. Oh, sorry, Jeremy.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've owned a couple of houses. There are things that I miss about it. There are things I really don't. Like having to deal with people replacing my roof, dealing with, yeah.
The roofers are fine. It's the HOA that I just basically ignored anyway, but here we are. I already shared that though. Jamie, did you want to toss that idea out into the into the voice, since this is live streamed and we don't get the chats in the live stream?
You're on mute.
Hardware mute, maybe?
You could hear you before.
There is a nothing, not even an echo, but a nothing.
Yeah. I will say that this idea is something that I'm very interested in, as I am currently at a very new organization who is struggling with this exact thing. So once it's presented, I'm really stoked to hear some ideas about it, because this is a constant problem.
Knowledge management remains to be the biggest unsolved problem in all of computers, besides DNS.
Well, are we talking knowledge management or knowledge gathering in this respect?
I mean,
like
I think there's
might be
overlap.
I mean, it's
We'll wait for Jamie to return and share.
In terms of knowledge transfer things, I would say just don't use Bookstack. That's on the negative side of that, because I find it to be really hard to organize properly. But that could also be because my org forked it already and put an entire department as a shelf rather than like a topic as a shelf. So
I've never worked in an organization that does this well, who doesn't put the docs next to the code. It always ends up siloed and old.
yeah, and then like this is where, like, you know, the most reactive information is always in the README, but then, you know, there's always useful things elsewhere, and it's that question of like, how do you build the constant loop of, you know, iterator has created change, document change, you know, use change, you know, alert on change process to people who need to know, and then return to zero.
I just have to make my own notes because it seems like everybody wants the notes in a different place, in a different format. Some person wants it in Confluence, another person wants it in OneNote, somebody wants it in GitHub. I just, whatever they have, I just convert it and put it into my own little thing.
Here's an interesting exercise about this particular topic. Oh, Jamie's back. Cool. But real quick, go to your for the viewers at home. An interesting exercise. Go to your Jira board or whatever, you know, kind of thing that you're looking at, and look in your backlog and see how many things say document blah or add documentation to blah. That's a really good way to kind of see what the health of your stuff is, because that's I've got 3. I'll be honest. I've got 3 of those in my backlog right now.
And then also take a look at how many of those have not been touched in more than 6 months, and then have a cry party.
You can also try to update your production readiness review documents if you have them, and add documentation needs to be included for something to go live. But that's always funny enforcing.
Yeah, but if you already have a production readiness document, you're way ahead of the curve, aren't you?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I only have one because I wrote it at a previous place, and then I brought it here and said, maybe the services that already exist should follow this guide I wrote somewhere else.
Just
Yeah.
cargo cult that forever. Absolutely.
I mean, that's yes.
my favorite is scrolling to going to a half-built document and looking at the notes at the bottoms, and it's by a guy who's your predecessor who left like a week after you joined. And it says 2 years ago, oh yeah, I should add documentation to this for the rest of the processes. I'm not bitter, I swear.
I always at least have something that has all the commands that I ran, because I usually cannot remember what I did 2 weeks ago, much less 6 months ago. So I
This
at
is
least
the-
have every command that I've run.
It's what was it? Bash history, and then there's the setting for infinite.
Yeah, I've got that in my Z shell, and I've cargo culted my Z shell history files for like 6 years.
I lost
When I
most of my bash history between the last job and this one after literally taking it with me, which was a bummer. I just didn't copy it. I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah, I had to rebuild mine too, and what was it? One time I did have to tell my new boss, like, I'm sorry, I can't do anything right now. I have got to compile my own version of Vim, and he's like, "Why are you compiling Vim?" He's like, "Well, I have reasons. Okay, there are reasons for doing this."
Yeah,
It's not
sorry, I
good
don't know
ones.
Sorry, I don't know Kubernetes anymore. It turns out it was just in my bash history.
I keep a text file just called goddamn scratchpad that goes back years of things like that. Just like, oh, what's the right incantation and like capitalization for like SCPing something? Oh, how do I like do this and background it and like loop again? Yes. There's some real ugly, beautiful, like churn through every server bash for loops in there from particular crimes that couldn't be handled via Puppet or Chef.
There are documents from one of the first companies I worked at that I have that are literally just find commands that they shoved into a log rotate function for Hadoop at the time because Hadoop was poor log rotate or something. And I'm still like, you know what? These are actually useful for other crappy things that don't do log rotate properly. And it lives on. I'm pretty sure I've used it at least once at every single company somewhere. There's a cron job that I wrote, unless that server no longer exists. That's just like, here's this find command that I stole from a company back in like 2011, 2012. Yeah.
Somewhere there's a cron job is something I think everybody can say. It's also a cry party source.
I once spent like 3 days trying to figure out how I was working on hardware at the time that was Raspberry Pis that helped with a hand hygiene compliance tracking solution in hospitals. And when they started up, there was a script that would run that was important to our provisioning process, and to it knowing its own identity and what it would connect to. I could not for the life of me find how this dang thing was triggered. I was like, okay, like I'm checking LaunchD, I'm checking cron, I'm checking every startup place I can think of. Eventually I asked one of the engineers that's been there a long time, and it's like /Etsy/profile. It's like, it was either that or it was some even more obscure place. It's just, I have never heard of this place, but okay, startup things can run there.
Tell me more about hand hygiene compliance tracking.
Okay, so this was a real wild set of infrastructure. Doctors and nurses would wear badges that when we would track their physical location via sensors throughout a hospital that would all mesh together on the 2.4 gigahertz band and send data back to these things we called comm hubs. These were the Raspberry Pi based devices. They had some custom antenna hardware and its own separate microcontroller for that. And that would send data in, and it would VPN into our AWS infrastructure and send the data out. They were smart enough so that if like there'd be a lot of comm hubs per hospital. So if one comm hub went down, we probably, it's not like there was instrumentation for this, probably not losing data. When I started, about 20% of them were down at any given time for a variety of reasons, which we didn't have visibility into. And by the time we left, I'd gotten it under 2%.
But is the idea that if a doctor or nurse doesn't wash their hands, it sets off an alert on a board?
The idea is that we can track compliance because doctors and nurses need to wash their hands a truly titanic amount. It is anytime they enter a patient room, anytime they're in there for more than 90, and then they're in there for 90 seconds or more, then they also need to wash when they exit. There's hand sanitizer on the doors. So we also built the hand sanitizer dispensers, which would detect, oh yeah, someone put a hand in there. Who is the closest badge? So we could get,
amazing.
yeah, it was really impressive. And the thing is that like this statistically leads to fewer hospital acquired infections, which are really nasty. Because doctors and nurses are dealing with terrifying shit. However, you also like, you're not going for 100% compliance ever. That is like just useless. If you're over 60% compliance, you see diminishing returns on increasing it in terms of decreasing hospital acquired infections, which is more a measure of just how much doctors and nurses need to wash their hands. They are regulatorily required to track this, but they are allowed to do it via like spot checks of having someone with a clipboard, like observing an area. So you know to wash your hands when you see someone with a clipboard, but the idea was let's actually get visibility into like all of these situations when someone's supposed to wash their hands. This was also like 2018, so
pre-pandemic and the washing of hands from that.
They're probably making bank now.
If they've survived, the churn rate at that company was when I checked, I think sometime last year, everybody I knew who had been there, except for the 3 founders, had left and or been replaced.
Hate to see that kind of situation.
Yep. They went through a huge funding crunch right after I left the company, and from a couple friends there that I talked to, it was major burnoutville.
Sounds like you got out just in time.
That I did. Yeah. I had my own little cry party with that once. We were installing in a new hospital, and our employee who's physically installing the devices is there, and I'm not seeing any of them come online. And so I'm talking to hospital IT about like, hey, what's the Wi-Fi password? And they tell it to me again. I've had it, I've programmed it into these things. One character is different. So I have a bunch of already provisioned devices that are labeled, that are stacked, that are ready. Yeah, exactly. Nick's got it. It was Hunter 3. They'd sent me Hunter 2. Like, come on. And so I'm sitting there like, what do? I have a non-technical installation expert who does not know like what a Unix shell is. How do I do this? The answer was like, make a special USB stick that has all of our provisioning equipment or provisioning stuff on it. Like slap that together as a zip file, send it to him, give him instructions to unzip it onto a drive, and then tell him the order to go through devices to fully reprovision all of them while they're in the hospital.
Too bad you can't do something like what Cloudflare does with their deployments. So there's a great article on it. Basically, they have a trigger on USB plugin that then does a whole bunch of talking to some backend servers, and it's how they do like updates and stuff. And they can just have a random tech walk around with like an iPad and just the USB cable like plug in, and then it just kicks off a new provision. It's ridiculous, but I don't know how to do that with technically IoT.
That was effectively what we were doing, only like it was just the barest configuration. It was like the barest network and name configuration and like what its endpoint servers would be, because this is it gets on the network. Had I been there longer, I had ideas about rigging up like a hotspot with an Ethernet cable, or other means of doing things like that in the field, but like this got the job done enough for them to get out.
If we need another story of cry, I've got a pretty good one. So this would have been, oh gosh, 2 years ago now. I'm working for a company that rhymes with Stoker Pars. We are, if any of you watch Monday Night Football or Football on Fox, you might have seen the product that I'm talking about. This was a major rollout, right? So we had invested a fair amount of time into a battle-tested framework that we had operated in other multiple different product configurations. So as far as the team was concerned, this was going to be a slam dunk. We, for another sports metaphor, so we had load tested this thing backwards and forwards. We had fully decoupled, we had basically stripped the code base down to exactly what was needed. We had optimized the heck out of it. We got in at least 2 years of development runway before we ran this product. So we had turned this thing into a well-oiled machine, and we were ready. We were like fully capable of taking on tens of thousands of users in under a minute. We think that we're ready to go, and so we're lining up all of our vendor contractors, and we're saying like, all right, vendors, like we are fully expecting in the run up to Monday Night Football that we're expecting this kind of load curve. Are y'all ready for that? And this was our first time as a team using Twilio as a service. And so we go to our Twilio vendor and we're like, guys, this is not load like you're used to. Like your normal provisioning is not going, auto scaling does not help you here. It's too fast, it's too quick. Like by the time you've got new servers in your cluster, the load's going to be gone and you'll have missed the window. And our metrics are driven on user acquisition. So we need to have you up and stable through the entire event. And the event's only going to last 10 minutes. And in that time, you're going to get upwards of 6 figures worth of people coming through. Is that something you can take, that you can handle? Yeah, we can handle that. Okay, you're sure? Yeah, we're sure. Monday night happens. We're all up, we're watching the game. We see the first, because the whole thing was linked very tightly with a high dollar ad spend. So they throw, the first round of ads at the television, and I witnessed what happens when several million people see something all at the same time. It is terrifying, by the way. We watch our load spike up. We have all the metrics looking good, New Relic's looking good. We're like, oh, we're acquiring, look at all this, like it's going. And then we start seeing a plateau. It's hardlining plateauing. We're getting tons of error reports coming off of all our mobile client dashboards. We are panicking now. The fuck is happening? What's going on? We start looking through. We're looking through all of our application logs, trying to sort through what's happening. We're realizing that Twilio has hard capped us, and we've lost the window. Right? Game starts. Window's over. Users are gone. Doesn't matter anymore. We're all
not even they couldn't handle it. They just capped you.
Yeah. They just didn't have the hardware available, and so we're like, what? So RFO, we know what went wrong. Wasn't us, it was them. We have a very set of hard conversations with them about, it's like, you need to migrate up. We don't know what's up with your infrastructure. And so they, their engineers, all their engineers come online for us, and we start hashing out what happened, what the set of events were, how it needs to function. So it turns out that for those of you that don't know about Twilio infrastructure internally, most Twilio accounts exist inside of their main service cloud, which is a set of EKS clusters that are running their service. So Twilio and SendGrid are actually two wings of the same family. And Twilio is, when SendGrid acquired Twilio, they're all running on EKS now. So their EKS clusters have a normal sort of customer profile that's applied to them. And that allows for their HPA pod provisioners allow them to scale horizontally out all of their ingress points so that they can then funnel them into a set of queues on the back end for management, right? Because up to like 8 seconds worth of latency is acceptable for somebody's SMS. Like, you type in the SMS code and then it gets back to Twilio and it gets back to you. Like 8 seconds is totally fine in that flow. Like a user feels like it's slow, but it's not like, oh, this is a broken product, right? So that's how they do it, is all of it's async. So it gets filed in a queue, that queue then ends up getting processed, they send out a message, and then there's an open socket waiting for the customer to return that message. Our load could not live alongside the other customers without basically consuming too much. So they had to carve off members of their infrastructure team to go build us a cluster, which is actually not uncommon for them. They had done this before for NFL, the organization. They'd done this before for, I think, like Taco Bell or something, some other large org that needed to have this. And they had to go build us a special cluster that now hosts this product specifically for us. And as the provisioning capacity to handle that load, because to this day, this product is still in live. It's still operating. I'm no longer on the team. And I wish those guys the best of luck. They're all superstars. I love them all. But my God, was that like a huge learning lesson in like how to communicate with your vendor about what's about to happen. and really, like, if you know that you have a load profile, really show people some graphs of like, see this big spike? Like, that's going to happen to you. Like, you should account for that. Because you don't want to have a launch day like that. It was, man, that was just the biggest like excitement and the hugest bummer. But that product is still something that I'm very proud of, and you know, it can handle load like nothing else that I've worked on can. It was crazy. But yeah, that was my launch day cry, and maybe launch week cry really. We had to continue on with that for a little while, and thankfully we didn't have to deal with games again until Saturday. But yeah, that week was all just like, God damn it, Twilio.
I will say, if you ever work in ad space, it is literally a cry party in infrastructure. That's one of the companies I work for deals with attribution. Some companies are nice to us and kind of give it to us in line. As it comes into them, we get it. Some companies who are really big love to batch, which is terrible. It's the big ones who like to batch. I don't know why. We fondly call them dumps for a reason. And sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're not. Yeah. That's all I'm going to say to that.
Can I see a sound check? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, welcome.
Perfect. Sorry about that. So my question was earlier was that, you know, I'm moving from a small company to a big company, and how does everyone like, how do you learn knowledge from a, how do you accentuate your knowledge gaps? Like, how do you actually learn something if you're not working in that company at that time? So if you're going from a small business to a big business, and a big business based on directories and everything else, like, how do you fill those gaps? Is it textbooks? Is it learning online? Or how do people fill a gap in for that sort of scenario? Sorry, I'm not making that much sense, but.
Do you mean like general technology that you haven't worked with, or
Well, exactly. So not
that?
necessarily tech, but so I imagine like in the idea of requesting access to certain systems, or you're trying to do something else, but you're not used to it because you've always had root access because you've always been in a small company. Maybe this is quite specific.
I log into HangOps.
Well, I have that, which is why I'm here, right? But yeah, yeah. It's like, how do you feel? So the broader question is, how do you fill knowledge gaps? That is my question.
I make a big OneNote, and I just slowly gather information. I want to know all the URLs for their internal services, who to contact to get access, API information. I just start making a bunch of tabs, because if you just say like it's going to be in Confluence, like different parts of the organization are going to have their documentation in different formats in different places, and I just can't handle it. It has to be in one place for me, and then if somebody else wants it, I'll take that and make it look nice and put it up somewhere for them.
One thing that I did, because I'm the group that I'm in right now, we kind of had to hit the ground running really hard. So as somebody who came in and had no direction when I joined, the first thing that I did is I set up one-on-ones with basically every person of import that I could figure out that I could time off of. And I would ask them what they wanted, what they were doing, sort of, you know, give them the 20 questions, you know, keep a time box to 30 minutes or something, but then like just get a little interview out of them so that I could understand like what their role was in the organization, and also like what information I needed to, what information they cared about effectively. And so that way I could make sure that when I was talking with them, if I had a gap in my knowledge, I could go back and do my learning before I talk to that person and blow through their time. Because like that, I'm extremely, extremely careful about using people's time, especially senior engineers' time. Like if they're working on a critical project for the organization, then there's like, I don't want to be pestering them with, 20 questions about the basics of Kubernetes. Like the most that I want to like have them answer is like, hey, what's the auth for this? Like, where do I find the keys to this thing? And then more than that, like I will back off and be like, if there's, I'll go do my reading now.
I think there's something
that's
that can be really.
There's always an offset about like you don't use up someone's time, but you also want to know about it to actually administer it. It's tricky, right? I think it's part of it. But I appreciate it. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Nick
think. Go ahead.
Nick said that comment in chat about being empathetic to other people and future you by migrating knowledge from OneNote into something that can be shared and community edited, which is true, right? Like you want to periodically feed that anything from a private note-taking device back into a community repository, but it is totally reasonable to want to take private notes. But yeah, don't be Brent.
I agree with that, like taking private notes. Like I've got a crap load of gists that I'm just like, here is where I dump all my stuff. Maybe use OneNote. I use Notion and gists for my stuff. But I feel like there's certain amounts of information that has a lifespan, and you don't want some of that stuff to actually get out to the rest of the org if it is something that matters for the next 2 weeks, right? And maybe become very outdated very quickly. The other thing I was going to mention to what Ben was saying, like definitely I've used the tactic of going and meeting people who chat with them, pick their brains on stuff. The biggest, most important thing that I've got out of it though is the last question that I'll ask them is like, who else should I be talking to? Like who should I be talking to about this? So like, I mean, I don't want to bug you about it unless that's cool. But like, who else? Like, just point me there. Give me a name. Give me some names. A chat of your choice program channel to go to. Like, just it's the same thing that I say to everybody that I work with is like, feel free to ask me. If I don't know, I'll try and point you to the person that does.
Yeah, I think another one is so ask where can I go find out about this stuff, right? Where is this written down? Let me go read, right? Because those aren't always obvious, sadly. And then as much as I can read or go poke around to discover all of the what's, take a bunch of notes and then go back with, okay, now tell me the whys if it's not written down, because like, cool, you've got this thing here. Why do we do it that way, right? What was like, assuming all of the things made sense at the time, understanding what those rationales were for implementing something in a particular way is super, super valuable, so that you don't just go, oh, well, this is dumb. Let's rip this out and put this other thing in, and suddenly everything falls apart because there was a real good reason that just was completely non-obvious, and maybe it wasn't written down.
This is exactly where like, and I'll soapbox for like 30 seconds. Josh probably knows where I'm going with this, but like, if your company has an RFC process, that is fantastic, because an RFC process, you can capture exactly those decisions as to why did we do this? Was this question asked? Have a spot in there for abandoned ideas. Like, we went down this path. Here's why we didn't do X. It's so valuable to have that right there. And it doesn't have to be a one-time, like, this is all the things. It can be a living document that, here's the idea and we can update it as we go forward. But for that initial, like, why were these decisions made? Having an RFC
That's
process.
how I figured out how stuff worked and why it was broke.
Yep.
Who changed stuff, or what were people doing 2 years ago when this file stamp changed? what RFCs went in at that time?
I've looked at old scripts and went, oh, this was a duct tape and WD-40 situation. Time to write it in Python.
There's a my business is managing engineers, but Jamie, your killer feature is that you're new to the org, and so you're not normalized to tribal knowledge. And so I know when I have engineers join me who are new to the team or new to the org, I'm trying to leverage that naivete in order to help us curate that body of knowledge. So we have a series of traditional onboarding docs, do this, do that, but then as well as trying to provide the context around how a lot of systems work. And the feedback I will give to those engineers is these are the people, the named people you can connect with to follow up if these high-level documents around how things work aren't clear. And they're empowered to kind of go, and it's made very clear to them, like, go grab time. That's an acceptable thing to do. You're not going to offend anybody trying to grab calendar time to go follow up on where those docs may be not able to convey everything you need to get, reviewing them asynchronously. And it's incumbent on you within your first 30 and 60 days to help curate that, right? We're going to grow this team more down the road. Someone will churn, all that type of stuff. So one of your very first objectives is helping to true up and leverage your being new to help make that easier for future you. And that seems to work reasonably well, to allow that stuff to live on, to where you don't end up with why there's somebody goes, shit, I don't know who to talk to, as well as, oops, stuff's super out of date and doesn't match reality.
We did that at one of my with our onboarding doc. It literally was living. The new person who got onboarded by it would update it after their onboarding with anything that was missing from their onboarding.
We, or at least I've tried to do that all the time. I'm like, here's our engineering docs and these other docs. If you get stuck on something, please update it or tell me so I can help you update it, because I'm sure everything's wrong.
Yeah, part of the initial, like, I'm also a manager, and like my initial like 30, 60, 90 plan is go to this repository, build the product that our team builds, and use it. Like, take notes. If it doesn't work and you have to ask people, we got a problem, let's fix it. But going through that exercise, super valuable.
I was able to implement at our last place, or get the other team leads and managers to agree that, with the principle that if a new user has a bad time, it's a bug, and then to treat them like bug tickets. Sorry, my son is screaming in the background also, and Chris can only do so much.
It's fine.
Yeah, I've always
it's also
liked
a feature of today's work environment, just like Joshua's roof noises.
Right? Super true. I've always liked that that idea that if a user is having a bad time, that's a bug, like whatever it may be. That is super true. I first saw that from Jordan Sissel, had it on his Twitter profile for a long time.
Yeah, that's where I got it too.
Yeah. Oh, Jordan, why is he not here?
It seems like it's really connected to like a basic customer service ethic or mentality that seems to be missing from a lot of IT organizations.
Yeah, and one thing that internal IT organizations seem to forget is that all of the employees that work at the company are your customers, and customer service is highly, highly important, because when your employees aren't able to be productive, they can't do their jobs and they can't earn their company money, and that's like why your company's in business at the end of the day.
When some big orgs, there's just a lot of factionalism where if you're not on our team, if you're not in our area, then we don't care about you because you're not contributing to our budget.
Yeah,
well, this is the same company.
Yeah, and that's kind of related to the little diatribe I had in the Cry Party channel in a thread the other day, where, you're all on the same team and everybody owns every problem that exists in the organization. Like whether you want to or not, like everybody has to own that. At some point, somebody's going to be accountable.
So that is certainly, I don't know, US orgs that I have worked in, or US centric orgs that I've worked in, that has worked as a line of bringing shareholders value. That has been something that has been very easy to use, and people kind of get in line behind that pretty quickly. What I found with European organizations and with organizations that have remote bases, that has not always worked for me. I state that as because like I culturally could not comprehend why these people were behaving the way that they did. And this is something that I will say that like in most US based organizations, I will say that has worked, right? It is very easy to make arguments along those lines because at the end of the day, bring shareholders value, right? Inside of massive organizations, and specifically I'm talking about the one that I recently vacated, which now goes by the name of Flutter. It is an organization that was grown by acquisition, which means that the factionalism was real. And is something that we consistently had to work within and work against. And this was I had to read a lot about how to strategize around basically getting internal support for modernization efforts, because there was a lot of really, really smart people there. There are a lot of really, really smart people there, but it was really difficult to break down the boundaries between the various teams in order to talk about how to implement out the sorts of fundamental changes that were needed to grow products and to let products succeed on their own merits. Because I think that with a lot of monolithic organizations, you have, the factionalism is a political problem that can only be solved by people deciding to solve that issue. But then there's also the technical organization that grew underneath that. And this is the thing that I think that is really difficult in these transitions, is that even, if we posit that software is the mirror of the political organization that created it, your organization might mature past the technical capacity of your systems to maintain that idea. And so we ran into this a lot where, I had, engineers and people on staff who were totally interested in trying to run modernization efforts. But then we would get down to the brass tacks and start looking at the systems, and they'd be like, to unwind and re-architect this is to boil the ocean once again. And we've already boiled it once. So the value prop here is like, it's unknown on the top end and low at best, is the sorts of things that I would have to deal with, right? And I think that, there is a point in time that I had, this is years of therapy have taught me, that there is a point in time that you as an individual operator and as one political person, one political unit inside of your organization have to decide, is this going to be my problem?
I mean, you're talking about specifically the thing that Little Idea, Andrew Clay Schaefer, has been talking about for years, like that. Show me the incentive structures within your organization, and I will tell you all you need to know about how to solve those problems. Like that thing of that. I'm not 100%. I agree with you about like the end effect of misaligned incentive structures, or like you've grown past what you design. I don't know. I'm gonna have to let this talk go because it's 12:59 though.
Yeah, I had one
just about the end
percolating
of the
there
hour.
too, but I was like, I guess
We don't have to end exactly at the hour mark. We can keep talking, but I do have a hard stop in like 45 minutes. So there's that.
Me as well. I gotta go.
I'm technically off work today, so
Nice.
go pick up my mom at the airport.
I
Cool
was
story.
gonna say that one of the things that we're all probably used to receiving just a ton of messages on LinkedIn, like, you're an SRE, let me tell you about this amazing opportunity. And it's always like someone to like start the practice. It's always someone to like build a new team, which to me reads as they have no idea about what the actual cultural changes to really have an SRE practice mean. And that they expect silos and for someone to sit there and solve the problem with capital letters. And in the same vein, I think that like customer service is really a bellwether for how the company is doing. If your customer service people are happy, that's reflective of like the product is working with them to make sure that bugs come out. Product is working back with dev, SRE, etc. and that there needs to be communication channels and feedback channels. Because like, yeah, you can have all the UX researchers you want, but also like customer service is going to be the ones right there on the ground with people who are having a bad time.
That's exactly how I am measuring, like with some of the metrics that we put together for my team, is we work directly with the support team for the products that that my internal team is helping support. So when support has a bad day, we know that we are not doing our job. And support folks generally are having a bad day just by the nature of what they're doing. So we have metrics in place to be like, are we actually making their lives better and reducing the sub ones and reducing sub twos and reducing the types of issues and focusing on that? Not only just to use that as, hey, here's some places where we should focus our efforts, but also like, are we making life better? Because that's a heavily circular thing of like, build an application, send it to customers. Customers have a bad time. Support has a bad time. Guess what? There's something missing in that loop, and this is why I made a team to be in that middle part, which is.
Have you done any work to figure out, like, so that super important, really awesome thing to do. One of the things that I think about and from that perspective is, what about the behaviors that people already normalized before you started those efforts?
That's been a really interesting one, because like there's I'm not going to get into inside baseball or anything, but like there's a lot of it's you see the same kind of things at all of the different places that I've worked, in terms of like certain bits of siloing, certain bits of not my problem, and throwing stuff over the wall. It's worse some places, it's better some places, it'll vary. The big thing that we're doing that I think is valuable, that allows us to kind of change those behaviors and stuff like that, is modeling the good behaviors, and actually modeling and showing and just displaying these things, which sounds really simple, but it works for the most part, unless people are actively fighting against it for some reason, which I know, Sean, you and I could probably go on for an hour about the same incentivization and all of that fun stuff. But yeah, most people want to do the right thing, and they want to do, be part of the team that's making good stuff, and if you can just sort of tap into that natural urge to be, someone who is making good things, it goes a long way. It's not always easy, but it goes a long way if you can find it. Also completely unrelated, but also hilarious, that as we were talking in the last hour or so, there was also a Twitter thread of former coworkers and I that were talking that turned into a cry party. So it's a good day for it, apparently.
Wednesday is cry party day.
The great part about cry party is that I really love complaining, and it seems like a lot of people don't like hearing it.
Well,
yeah, it's channeled into a certain place.
Yeah, it's great to have a specific place where people can get that kind of commiseration.
Because if you whine too much, it messes up the feel and mood of the team, and then it makes everyone negative, and that's bad.
Well, and Twitter is a great place for complaining and dragging people down in a very large and public fashion. So try and avoid that on Twitter to some degree, but also I'm also somebody who likes to complain.
I feel like it depends on, well, no, I feel like the outcome and the attitude and the response depends on what you want to get out of it. Are you complaining for the sake of complaining, which is fine? Are you complaining because you want something? You want some kind of response? Or are you complaining because something is wrong and you need it fixed, or you need help or something like that? Right. And I think all those are valid, but that they have different sort of forums that are more appropriate depending on what things are.
I think in my last job, it was just such a huge organization that we just sort of felt helpless, you know? And so it's not like we could affect the change anyway, or we didn't feel like we could. Whereas now that I'm in a smaller company, I can just fix it.
It is easier to get that inertia for fixing things in smaller companies. That's absolutely true. And even in medium companies, it can be hard to work against like the inertia of particular habits and tribal knowledge.
There's definitely a limit though. Like right now I'm at quite a small company engineering wise. As in there's 5 developers and me running / doing all of the operational infrastructure side of things. And coming to stuff where like I got railroaded by a hey, the billing team needs this service. We already bought it. It just needs to get deployed on our Windows servers. And I was like, oh, we don't have those. Or Microsoft SQL. And oh, it needs a VPN too. Cool. So this is going to take me literally 3 or 4 weeks to do.
And we told the customer you'll have it tomorrow.
Oh, they said, can we have it next week? And I said, no. But now we run 2 SQL server, or we run a SQL server instance in GCP and 2 Windows server in 2019 instances. And instead of a VPN, I managed to actually use Cloudflare Access, which is pretty cool. On the call with the sales team from the company for the product I had to install, they said, or sales and technical, they're like, yeah, it has to go behind a VPN because we failed our security scans when we put it public. I said, cool. They're like, but one day we're going to get that taken care of. And I said, cool. Please don't.
It's never.
Yeah, this was, they're like, just run it on a SQL server that's at least 32 gigs of memory and 4 cores. And I said, oh, what? That's a lot. And they're like, yeah, well, normally people just throw it on an existing one. I'm like, well, what size do you actually need? Because we don't have an existing one. And they couldn't answer that either. So it's just
make
a
those
fun
numbers
time.
up.
I don't know, but the application and dev servers also needed to be 4 core 32 gigs. So it feels like they just made the numbers up. I'll probably monitor it for a bit since the initial infrastructure cost was almost as much as our entire GCP spend for everything else because SQL Server licensing. As far as I can tell, it does run on a web instance, which cut it from like a $1,400 license to like a $60 license a month or something, which is cool. Anyway, that's enough of that cry party. on the flip side, Cloudflare Access was very nice. It was cool to set up, and I hadn't used it before, but it was way nicer than making tunnels or running a VPN service myself.
I have one more really sad story, and then I got to jam. But this is a fun one, and it kind of goes a little bit back to the siloing and sort of some of the stuff that you were touching on, Ben, about trying to get internal movement on migrating from old stuff or broken stuff to newer things. There was a place that I worked for a little bit, and they had they grew very, very quickly at a certain point in time, and I got in there at a point where they were at like this part of the curve, like that hockey stick unicorn bit, and immediately within like 2 months I realized that there was a old like OG and new people divide. And the OG people could go into any project they wanted anywhere in the company and do pretty much whatever they wanted, and just open up a PR or merge a PR or close somebody's, like, we're not doing it this way, close, here's mine, completely out of any kind of other team thing. So that became a really interesting thing. and I, you know, I used my my legs to make the choice on what I wanted to do with that, and it was. I only lasted like 6 months there because I was just like, this environment.
A very similar environment caused me to have my shortest stint ever at a job, which was, I think it was April to August. I built like one logging setup, and then I was like, well, and I'm done. Here are the docs. Goodbye. And it was things like, I don't even remember the coworker at the time's name, but John, why do we do this way? You weren't here when we did it. You wouldn't understand. Okay, cool. Thanks. And the manager referring everything to like whatever John says. Sorry to any Johns. You weren't him.
Yeah, I think new people's opinions is one of the most valuable things in IT, because experienced people become set in their ways and they don't adapt, and they also like make snap judgments about products and situations that were true. It was true 10 years ago, but now it's not true anymore because bugs have been fixed, or you know, IT has moved on, or things like that. Whereas a new person will come in and say, why don't you just do this and this? And for some reason, someone with 10 years experience just wouldn't have thought outside the box like that.
I've been describing this to my coworkers as I try to keep myself a little bit purposefully stupid. And the reason is that I know that I will ossify into a set of patterns, but if I can offload brain context as frequently as possible and keep myself as much of a blank slate, then I'm not just falling into the same, I'm critically thinking about every set of problems that comes my way. And I'm not developing out a toolbox that is, you know, a series of, you know, I think what the best example that I had is like, there was a guy that came into a project who had the entire project warped around his vimRC. Like his vimRC was the way that you deployed it. His vimRC was the way that you wrote code. His vimRC was the way that you validated code. And that was the way that you know, worked with him, is that you adopted his way of working. And when I realized that like, that's just that's like easy to do. Like that's literally like the easiest thing to do, in the sense of like, if your tool setup is now everyone's tool setup, then you have built a system that isn't a system, it's your tooling. You know, it's whatever you decide. And that to me is like, that's not a collaborative environment where many minds can have equal share in what is going to happen. That's in everybody has to think like you. And I don't want people to think like me. Like I have my own space that I occupy, and like I can't like onboard everybody into my way of being, right? I'm trying to develop a mode of working that is good enough for the 80% case. And if we can get 80% out of everybody, then we're doing really, really good.
Yeah, you don't want to be up here. I gotta run.
There's so many people on IT like that too.
Indeed. Well, everybody, thank you for joining and sharing. This was a fabulous discussion. I think we should do it again next week. And we will. We'll have HangOps next week. It might be a cry party. It might be a cheer party. You never know what the week will hold. Hopefully your week is full of cheers. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Sean.
Gross in this.
Bye.